it's almost like people are willing and happy to spend multiple thousands of dollars on great speakers and TVs, and then when they get to their network, they want to spend like $100, and
until
part
something
of
goes wrong,
yeah,
right? And then
right,
you're
exactly.
like, yeah. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by home integrators, Aaron Stallings and Michael O of TSP in Boston. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. It is a pleasure to have you guys on the show today. Thanks so much for doing this.
No, it's great to be here.
So I have to be honest, I had never heard the term home integrator until maybe a couple months ago when a podcast listener wrote in to describe the role. For the rest of us who may be unfamiliar, can you please tell us what you guys do? Michael, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to jump in. So a technology integrator, as it's developed over the years, used to be somebody that knew, let's say, hi-fi and stereos, but that's 20 years ago, and fast forward till now, and everything is technology in the home, right? I mean, and especially the last year with COVID, we've all lived at home, and we've all experienced poor Wi-Fi. We've all experienced like outdoor, that people want to listen to audio outdoors, and they may or may not have speakers or solutions. And so our job is to integrate all that technology into the home experience, into the experience of living in that place, in as best as we can, as the client wants it, and of course within budget, and with all of the other components and people that have to be involved in a project. We really just try to execute that vision.
And so what kind of things are people asking you to integrate, Aaron?
It runs the gamut, depending on the size of the home, the homeowners, their comfort level. Oftentimes different homeowners, different users of that system have different needs and different, comfort levels. So, but for residential, generally, you can almost expect there's going to be some element of lighting control, perhaps even a little bit of lighting design as well. Lots of, recommendations for types of lighting fixtures and layouts and what have you. And anything audiovisual related, almost every home has some type of, at least a TV. And these days with people being so familiar with solutions like with Sonos, which is, really the industry at this point, streaming is something that's just, again, kind of par for the course. Even if a homeowner isn't particularly that interested, they know that they'll have guests or children or someone who want that capability.
And is it heating and cooling equipment too?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about like shades and scene controls, like for your living room or great room?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So automated window treatments. We do a lot these days, more and more, I would say, somewhere in the realm of security as well. Mm-hmm. Surveillance cameras, door, access, keyless entry, that type of thing.
And honestly, I can tell you, of all the hats I wear in the household here, the IT guy is the one I'm least comfortable with. So I'm going to answer my own question when I say, why do we need you guys? But I'm going to let you take it from there.
Yeah. Well, I think if one of the reasons that people need us is because of scale is the simple word, right? I mean, in the sense that I think a lot of people, particularly if they live in an apartment, a condo, or a smaller home, and you go to Home Depot or you go on Amazon and you order a bunch of devices that smart lights, Sonos speakers, a Nest thermostat, a Ring, all of these things that we're talking about, that all these technologies that Aaron just mentioned are all things that you can just order and essentially DIY yourself, right? But what we find that people really need us, and where our specialty really kind of hits its stride, is when you get to houses of scale, right? And that may be a brownstone in Boston where you have 4 or 5 floors, and you put in a Wi-Fi in the basement, and it's only going to get halfway up. you need to have somebody, figure out where's the wiring going to go, what are the pathways, where's the best place for the Wi-Fi access point, and if you have an aesthetically, kind of a client that really, wants to sort of look at things in a very modern and clean look, then you really have to spend a lot of time thinking through, where are these things going to sit. You can't just have Sonos speakers on shelves because there are no shelves, right? I mean, in a lot of the projects that we're working on, the TVs are sort of a clean wall, and people don't want to see things. And so really our specialty is kind of integrating all of those pieces together. It's certainly one of the reasons that people really need us, is to think through all of these things in larger homes. And I'd also say one other key piece is cybersecurity nowadays, which you don't really hear that word as much around the home as you do in business, but we're starting to see the same types of things that are happening to businesses, the threat of ransomware and phishing attacks and all that stuff happening to individuals. And everybody's working from home now, or so many more people are doing it than before, that, it's actually a really important piece of the technology puzzle, which, to be honest, is much more difficult for somebody just to DIY or pick up themselves.
Can you guys tell me when was like your role, when did it become on people's radar? Like, is it only in the last few years, or have technology integrators been around for longer than I've been aware of them?
I would say, you want to take that, Mike?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, integrators have been around for quite a long time. I mean, there have been smart homes for a long while. They haven't been as easily accessible to the masses until more recently. But I mean, we're talking still, a decade or more ago. It really just depends. What we're hearing more about it and seeing more about it these days, because as Michael mentioned, these straight to consumer solutions are everywhere and really do serve the purpose of allowing access to home automation to homeowners who might not otherwise have the budget for it. Because these systems, as you can imagine, as the homes grow and the appetite for different technology grows, so does the budget. So there's a lot out there right now in front of people, really whetting the appetite for the industry.
I can tell you, my observations have been that some technologies have come and gone. Has that stuff been more standardized now? Do you have difficulty making things play well together still?
Well, it's a joke within both the IT world and the home integrators and home automation that when people have 10 standards and they say, well, what we really need is a standard to bring all these things together, then you end up with 11 standards, right? and it is kind of true. It's like Z-Wave, Zigbee, Wi-Fi. I mean, all of these things are trying to solve different problems. And ultimately, the thing is, one single platform can't do all things, right? And there are standards like Apple and Google, Amazon are working on, sort of the standard that rules them all. But, I don't expect that one either to really be the thing that takes over every home, because, they're going to build it towards a target, right? And it's just like in the world of home building, and nothing to do with technology and electronics. I mean, there are certain solutions that are made for condos and for city living. There are certain solutions that are made for 10,000 square foot vacation homes on the side of a lake. And those things, almost never overlap, right? I mean, yeah, the components and the fundamentals may be the same, but it's a completely different ballgame. And I think the same thing happens within technology. The standards will be made for certain areas, but they may not scale. And it's really our job and our role to almost be like curators of technology. So we're trying these things out before everybody else really kind of tries them out. And then we're trying them at scale. We're evaluating different products, and we're really trying to help, our clients make the right decisions, well before they have to make that decision. Like, do that research and understand, is this standard really viable? Is it relevant? Or is this going to be something that in 2 years will be replaced by yet, the 12th standard? So,
do people generally have a good idea about what they want to do with their home technology when they come to you? Or is this something you have to explain to them the options? And I presume there's a cost benefit equation associated with the kind of work you do.
Sure. I mean, again, I mean, it really does. There's a huge breadth of range there in terms of what people come to us with. Oftentimes, you do have homeowners who are looking for very specific solutions, like Lutron, like Savant, and they find us that way through those providers. Other times, you have someone who's just building a home and they're so excited to get started, but they've never had a smart home or they've had very little interaction or experience with one. And they really do look to us to educate them on the possibilities. So I can't, I mean, maybe Mike has a different take on this. I can't say one is better than the other. Sometimes it's great to start with someone fresh and you can really have some fun and get to flex your, creativity muscles a bit more. And there are those that come into it and when they know what they want, it's also sometimes very easy just to kind of to push through it and get to the end result. But yeah, I think we always expect at least some level of education on our part to our clients because technology is changing at such a speed, as you know. There's always something new to talk about, or a little, maybe even a slightly, different benefit from a solution that they thought they were aware of that they had no idea had changed.
Are most of your clients, or once again, I suspect it varies, but are they from the tech sector? I know Boston, where you do most of your work, is a very tech-oriented economy now. Are these folks in the tech business that come to you?
Well, it seems like everybody nowadays have some link to tech, but in terms of tech savviness, it's completely the wide range. I mean, our sort of biggest customers, may come more from the finance side of things, but they're investing in tech companies and are very sort of tech interested, right? And so, those types of clients are great to work with because they are sort of fun and experimental around technology, but they also understand, that it needs to be reliable. So there's limits. We're not just going to put in the bleeding edge technology, just because. We have some clients, like we have one client that works for Google and he's pulling out the next standard and doing a bunch of research himself. And it's kind of a fun collaboration because we're sort of, we're all working on the bleeding edge, but also trying to sort of say, well, look, that may seem like it will work, but our experience shows, that may be a little bit too far, in front of the pack. Right. And then we have people that are, really not tech savvy at all, but clearly, we talk about tech nowadays. I mean, the smartphone is tech, right? I mean, who doesn't have a smartphone? That is essentially the basis for most of the smart home interfaces nowadays. So, if you're not in tech or you're not sort of tech interested, I think people can see the benefit of, integrating all of these technologies together in the home to create a more seamless experience. And I use the simple example of, a 5-story brownstone in Boston, without smart lighting, and that could be on your phone or it could be a keypad on the wall or a touchscreen, however you want to implement it. You're having to walk up 4 flights of stairs to turn off the light, at the top bedroom that you forgot to turn off before you leave, or you just leave it on, right? And that LED's burning for the next, day straight. So, everything from that all the way up to integrating sound and TV and all those things is really kind of under our scope.
I suspect it varies, but when would you typically want to be brought into a residential project? Is there a right time that you'd be part of the design conversations, or are there sometimes occasions where the home is complete and they want to add technology after the fact? Can both of those scenarios work?
Absolutely, and we do all of it. Ideally, we love to come in early when we have a new construction, new design. We love to come in as early as possible so that we're part of the discussion, because so many design elements, whether they be coming from the architect firm or the interior designers, whoever they're working with, so much of the integration these days with intelligent home automation is really something that you want to integrate right from the beginning, whether that be, talking about framing so that we can put in, invisible speakers or what have you. These are things that are better to get started on as soon as possible in the process. But we do do a lot of retrofit, existing homes, and you get a set of circumstances to start with, and you go from there. Generally, when construction has already started to happen, and let's just say you're 2 weeks from bringing in an electrician, that's a really difficult time to bring in someone like a home automation integrator, because so much of the work that we do, especially in these more robust systems, is electrical. So having some time to be able to get familiar with the homeowners, find out what exactly their system should look like, and be able to put some designs together that the team can actually execute on, that's time consuming. And so we'd like as much time as possible, of course, like anyone else, but we generally have a solution for every entry point.
Is it your preference, guys, to use cabling when possible versus Wi-Fi? I guess it is, right? I'm assuming that when you can, you want to have cable.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we've learned. So the company really came from, a company I founded 30 years ago, and I was just doing IT work and helping businesses in the Boston area. And then, it sort of developed over the years, and some of our clients, some of the executives within those companies, had these sort of smart home situations. And we sort of have learned over the years and through, the various generations of IT technology, that despite how well things are working nowadays over Wi-Fi and wireless, that it is still better to wire. I mean, one of the reasons is just simply it's a shared part of this frequency spectrum. So, Wi-Fi works great. You can have these great speeds, but that's in a lab when you don't have, brownstone next to brownstone, and in many places, apartment on top of apartment, and everybody's sharing and using the same, frequency. And some of the manufacturers sort of make the mistake of just making the problem worse. Like, we've had stories and clients that have had Wi-Fi based lighting control, and they have sort of similar problems. It just gets congested, it slows down, you press the button on the light, and then a few seconds later your light turns on. Those types of things you eliminate because you're wired. But to Aaron's point, we have to be in the design process a lot earlier. So retrofit can be done wirelessly, and we use frequencies that aren't as often used and as congested. Certainly that's kind of a backstop for us, but really what we'd love to do is be able to put in the wiring upfront and make sure that things are communicating without congesting any of the spectrum out there.
Is it Cat5 like that, we've been using for 20 years, or is it something else that you're using for cabling in the ideal world?
It's a variation of Cat5. I mean, Cat5 has moved on to Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a. So what we're putting in now is what's called Cat6a and a shielded Cat6a. And so that means that in the case, like we have in many homes, you have restricted wire runs. You don't have that many risers to go up and down floors. You can share, you can be next to high voltage cabling. Obviously, we want to avoid it if we can, but if you do have situations where they cross over or they happen to be, in close proximity, that there's not as much interference. That also future-proofs you. I mean, nowadays, like, in big cities, gigabit internet is not uncommon, but, Cat6 or Cat5 and 5e really max out at 1 gigabit. So if you want this technology and the speeds to sort of keep up with the new generation of internet, I mean, they're talking about 5G and all of these things being able to sort of surpass, 1 gig eventually, then you need to have, something like Cat6a and Cat6a shielded to get up to 10 gigs.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up on a comment that Mike made too about, wireless versus wired. Totally, all of that is true, and generally what we attempt to do is wire when we can. But there are retrofit solutions that we stand behind completely. Lutron is one. Their radio frequency technology.
And that's been around for decades, if I'm not mistaken, right? That's old technology, right?
It's been around for quite a while, and they've perfected it. They really, really have. So in homes, if again going back to the 5-story brownstone, we're not ripping out, getting the place and doing all of the wiring over. Then you really are left with existing, wall switches and dimmers and that type of thing. So we can replace those with smart versions that speak to a smart system through radio frequency. And I can tell you, it's really the next best thing. It works fast. You don't have those huge, lag times, and we use them, especially in Boston with so many older homes. We're using them with frequency, and they're wonderful. They really, again, perfected their solutions there.
Is the CAT6 cable a significantly more expensive, Mike? Would that be a deal breaker to go from 5 to 6?
It generally isn't on its own. I mean, it is all part of the overall sort of smart home budget, and what we really try to do is navigate that once again as early as possible in the process. Like, nobody wants to get an extra $30,000 worth of technology and wiring or whatever inserted into their home building budget halfway through, right? And so what we really try to do is sort of go through that conversation. I mean, many people just want enough CAT6 to have access points in the right locations. Some people expand it out to have places for TVs and speakers and all that kind of stuff, and keypads as well. Some of them run over CAT6, some other low voltage. So the more that people are putting into these designs, absolutely, you can get into low voltage wiring, which on its own is 5 figures, for a decent sized home. But it's also right next to the high voltage electrical that's also 5 figures. So it's sort of, being able to sort of put this all together in the design. And, one of our jobs is to work really, really closely with architects and interior designers, so that part of the conversation isn't left out. Because the worst thing for us, and it's the worst thing for everybody, is for the client to come, halfway through the process, say, I'd like these features, ask the architect to do it, and then, we're putting together the budget. And no matter how much we can optimize it, it's an extra spend, and they're trying to shoehorn in technology, and nobody wants to be on that side of it. So we love to be part of the earlier part of the process to help figure out those numbers earlier.
As Aaron explained it to me when we met recently on one of your projects, you two have different roles in the company. Can you explain to me what your respective jobs are for the business?
You go ahead, Aaron. You can start.
Well, I am, my official title is Director of Smart Spaces, and I have worked with Michael for quite some time, helping with operations on the IT side of the business as well for many years. But generally, my role is to just manage our clients at a high level, our projects, work with our project managers as well as our engineers and technicians who work out in the field to make sure everything's being executed according to plan. And that's generally it. Of course, this is still a small company, and we wear many hats. So often I'm actually at the drawing board as well, working on plans, procuring, light fixtures, that type of thing. But overall, my goal is to keep us moving in the right direction and grow the business.
So you're the face of the company to the client. Is that a fair message?
It is. It's hard to compete with Michael O because he'll tell you what he does, but he's been around for so long and is such a great guy and is well known locally. He is really the true face of the company. But no, I do try to be the face of the Smart Spaces business, and I am here in Boston, so I am often the one who's out meeting with new prospects or what have you.
And where are you at, Mike, and what do you do for the business?
So I'm locared in the UK. I mean, I used to come over to
I had no freaking
Boston.
idea. So you're
no.
Wow.
I'm calling from about an hour outside of London. And that's basically, where I've been running the business from for the last year and a half. I mean, it used to be with COVID, I would, or before COVID, I would come into, Boston maybe every 6 weeks. Meet with the team, meet with the clients, all that kind of stuff. But, as the world has changed, so has our business. But, what my role has sort of shifted to really be is to focus on the technology and kind of like what's happening next. So, one of the, areas that I play around a lot in is sort of real-time rendering and VR. We're actually doing our first demo of a commercial AV space, which is another part of our business. Related to smart homes, but it's essentially kind of smart spaces in offices, and we're using VR to kind of imagine a space and make some key design decisions, with the client, and we're doing it all over Zoom, so they don't have to have a headset, but we're kind of have created this environment in 3 dimensions and are walking somebody through it, and we're making decisions like, where should the TV go, where should the camera go, what kind of view does it have. in the space. And I can see this stuff really actually over time working its way into residential. I mean, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, that certainly things like 3D renderings of interior spaces are very common nowadays, highly detailed, almost too detailed. They almost oversell spaces, and somebody walks into the real space and says, oh, this is it. I thought I was going to have a great sunset in the background and all that stuff. So my job is to kind of look at that technology, what's happening next, figure out, the direction, and still at the same time, yeah, I mean, like Aaron, I'm kind of in the weeds with projects, talking to clients, and I do a lot more on the commercial AV side as well. So,
do you both have a IT background? How does one get into this business?
Actually our team has a really diverse background, and I think it's one of the reasons that we do well in the industry. And I'll let Aaron talk about his background, which I think is a little different. I have an electrical engineering degree, a computer science degree from MIT, and like I kind of really just got into technology just because I loved it. I mean, really as a kid, and for me, growing up like in the 80s and 90s, I mean, this is when smart home like first became an idea, and I sort of fast forward 20 years, 30 years, then I'm able to actually execute and make these things happen. That's a lovely kind of idea, of taking this sort of little bits of technology that have existed, but really trying to synthesize this into what a client experiences on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of us come from the technology background, but people like Aaron come from slightly different areas, which I think is great.
How did you come to this business, Aaron?
I'm not even sure how I started. It's been 20 years total that I worked with Mike in sort of 2 iterations of this business. I actually have training in interior design, believe it or not, and I ended up working in the IT world, and have been stayed around so long because Michael has been great to work with, and I really believe in his vision for the business. And as I started to kind of get back into interiors and do some more work on this side, I have my own interior design company. Our smart home division was kind of blossoming out of the ground, and Michael thought it would be a good idea for me to kind of focus on that and see if there was a good path for me. And we were just playing it by ear to see how the business was going to go and how we would explore new ways of making homes intelligent. And yeah, it's been great. So I think in terms of interiors, informing home automation in particular with a lot of the higher end, the luxury residential homes that we do. I mean, they go hand in hand. I'm frequently the go-to at TSP for lighting needs, in terms of when we're a bit more involved in the lighting design and installation or procurement for residences. But even things like the keypad finishes, the styles of them, when we really push to get things like invisible speakers, although they're a premium product, why they matter so much to interior design and even architectural design. So it's been a great sort of melding of 2 different fields, but they're a lot more related than I think you might initially think.
And
that's really cool.
Let me add as well, Patrick, that I think if somebody's looking to get into this world, there's so many different entry points. I mean, we have people that worked in live AV, and particularly around COVID, that kind of whole industry shut down for a little while.
Just so folks know what you're talking about, you're talking about people who set up, for a live performance.
That's right,
and run the cables and microphones and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. So there's almost like, it's almost stage technology, right? Is one area that people can. We have other people that came from the Apple Store. I mean, they're sort of interested in technology or great at customer service, and they happen to sort of come through the Apple Store, and they've done they do great training. But people sort of run into a place where they're like, well, I don't really want to work retail anymore. What can I do next? And people land here. And then the other path, like Aaron was talking about, is really design, and that can be budding architects, designers, lighting designers. I mean, that's actually an area where there's a real dearth of good resources for home technology integrators. And it's in some ways it's an opportunity for us, because if we find those people and we hire them, people with more of a design orientation, more of an eye for the details. A lot of that translates through into technology integration, and I'm sure, like you've experienced in custom home building, there's just as many people that are really good with a hammer as that are really good sort of understanding all these details, and really, how do you execute at that level? I mean, you have to have a wide and very diverse team to succeed.
When I talk to folks who do trade work, they often have products and brands of equipment that they're comfortable with. And my guess is it's because they've had good experiences and no angry phone calls from clients largely, right? Do you have favorite gear that you try and stick with? And can you talk about that?
Sure. I'll go.
It's a deep subject, so
no, it's the answer is yes, of course. I mean, I think as much as we do pride ourselves on creating bespoke solutions, bespoke designs for our homeowners in particular, for efficiency's sake, we do have to, use some tried and true methods and solutions, and that I'll let Michael get into some of the ones that go more technical, like our networking equipment and what have you. But going just back to Lutron, for instance, on the lighting side, they are really the industry standard, as I'm sure you're aware, when it comes to the types of complex systems that we're putting into homes. We really do need to be able to put our full trust and confidence into these solutions. And a lot of companies do claim to provide, back-end support, aftercare support, that type of thing. We find that a lot of times that falls off for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. TSP, from our IT background and our basis of tech support on a regular basis, we plan to be in your life for a good while after we officially deliver a project, and therefore we're going to be servicing and maintaining and repairing these systems. So again, it's in our best interest to put in only the best that we are aware of and capable of installing.
Yeah, and I think the other piece, like Aaron was talking about, so beyond the sort of lighting aspect of it, there's the control aspect. So we do a lot with Savant. They're a longtime partners of ours. Touch panels, they do HVAC controls, they do AV controls like TVs and audio and video distribution. On the networking side, you might be surprised to hear that we're working with like Cisco. I mean, these are companies that you would normally see in a corporate environment. But that goes back to the cybersecurity discussion. We're finding that homeowners that are sort of thinking about things the right way are thinking, hey, cybersecurity is a threat. I need to invest in my network, not just from the standpoint of, getting good Wi-Fi, but also making sure that I have protection against being hacked. And we're seeing this, not only in the billionaires and the millionaires, like it's starting to work its way down into the everyday conversations. What are the things that I can do to make my network more secure? Because these threats are out there and becoming just more and more frequent part of the conversation. So we're implementing pretty like relatively expensive solutions relative to the things that people are used to investing in their network. And I don't say that to scare anyone away, but it's almost like people are willing and happy to spend multiple thousands of dollars on great speakers and TVs, and then when they get to their network, they want to spend like $100, and
until something goes wrong, right? And then you're
exactly.
like, yeah.
But it is a little bit of like where there has to be a distribution of the value, and one of the things we really try to educate customers is investing in the network, because it is so fundamental. It is really how all these devices talk to each other, and if there is one standard that has one, it's what's called IP, which is the Internet Protocol, right? It's the thing that all of your devices eventually talk to each other, whether or not that's to the outside world or each other over a network. And until your IP network is 100% solid and secure, like you really shouldn't build anything else on top of it. So that's really kind of your first priority of where to invest, and then do all the fun stuff on top.
I hope you'll name names, but are there products that you just like stay away from? You say no can do to clients. Like what is the stuff we should tell our folks who listen to this to stay away from?
I will name some names, but not necessarily because they're bad, right? I mean, I think the thing that I will go back to the word scale, which I brought up at the beginning of the podcast. if you don't think about scale, then you'll put in Philips Hue, you'll put in like Amazon Ring, you'll put in sort of solutions that, you go
Our
on the website.
consumer, right? This is like
Yeah,
something you do in a weekend as a family project or whatever, right?
exactly. But, I mean, Amazon's happy to sell you 100, well, I mean, Hues or whatever. I mean, it's that you can press a button, you can order it. But the problem really is that when you get to that point and you're actually having to add each individual device to your phone and the app, it becomes, really unworkable, both in terms of the installation, but also the long-term maintenance, right? The idea that you could sell this home and that person who's walking in, who's probably not as tech savvy as you, if you're somebody that's putting in a bunch of Hue, what are they going to walk into? And that's a scenario that we see time and time again. If you don't really think about the life cycle of both the technology, but also the home as a place, as something that gets sold, you end up, kind of forcing yourself, into corners and spending money that eventually you're going to have to spend again on solutions like Lutron Savant and others. So,
Anything you would tell folks to steer clear of, Aaron?
I'm sorry, I don't have a specific manufacturer to throw under the bus.
That makes me sad.
I know, I could tell that you wanted to hear. Well, I would say in general, I would say stay away from, and Mike alluded to this earlier, but just stay away from trying to get the latest and greatest. Sometimes the latest is not the greatest, by the way. Yeah. Oftentimes that's the case. And so we try to, again, intelligently, after, getting to know our clients and their needs and taking our perspective on the technology where it's at, we often steer people away from something that's too complicated. If you can imagine it, you can probably have it, but that doesn't mean you should. And if you do want to add in every feature in the known earth to your home automation system, it's probably going to have some bugs. That's just the way it is.
You'd say, I'm guessing, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but let stuff get a little more mature before you decide you have to have it. Is that a fair statement?
Sure. I think we want to make sure that this is a technology that we can depend on. I mean, the performance is everything. So if it works only like 20% of the time, it's not great. I don't care what you paid for it. So we do want to make sure that we are working with systems that are that are again backed by good reputation, lots of capital invested in that, and start there. And again, we're not here to enforce our vision on home automation to you. I mean, if you really do want something and we can find a way to make it happen, we'll certainly do that. But it's really about setting the expectation, and sometimes simplicity is better than not.
I'll mention one name to throw under the bus, which is anything that's related to Kickstarter, right? And Kickstarter is this sort of online, let me put in money to help like a company launch their product. And there's tons of stuff within the Internet of Things and home automation that people are launching. And the reason that I say to sort of to stay away from that, but both because of the maturity thing, but I think what I tend to see is when people are releasing sort of the latest, greatest thing and really trying to push the cost of those things down as low as possible, right? Because everybody's objective as a startup is to sell 1 million units of whatever it is. It could be a TV, it could be Bitcoin, it could be, a new smart speaker. But if you're really trying to push that number down, you're not paying attention to a couple of things. I mean, one is cybersecurity tends to go to the side. So if you look at a catalog of really hacked devices, the cheaper stuff is always top of the list, And the second thing is that a lot of the time, if they're pushing the cost of the devices down, it's because what you're paying isn't money, it's like your data, it's your privacy. So a lot of these scenarios, and people talk about this like with Ring as a device, you're selling, the access to video feeds that are being sort of accumulated by Amazon. There's certainly debates of how they use it. But the fact is, most of our high net worth individual clients are not putting in Ring because they don't trust where that data goes. And you do have to pay more to make sure that data is secure and your privacy is secure. But, for a lot of people, that is really meaningful and completely worth paying extra money for, especially nowadays.
That's interesting. I bring this up because the project where Aaron and I met there was this huge, what looked like to be, Ethernet network board. I'm sure it was phones and all kinds of stuff. And to me, it looked very expensive, although it was at least 10 years old. Do you guys have confidence that the stuff you're putting in people's homes today is going to be useful 10 years from now? Or is it going to have to all be ripped out? And is that something you have to worry about, or do clients worry about it?
Well, I think clients should worry about it. And that may be in the home integrator world sort of a contentious answer, because I think we would love to say, don't worry about it. The technology is like going to be around and it's going to be like 100% of what it is, now in 10 years. But the reality is it's not. I mean, in the same way the smartphone moves on in 10 years. So we have to be very careful as an integrator to select, the right solutions. We have to be upfront, set the expectation that in 5 or 10 years, there are certainly things that you're going to want to replace in this. And it has nothing to do with reliability or whether or not, the standard was relevant or not. It's just like, hey, there's a new app, right? I mean, Spotify 10 years didn't really exist as an idea. Streaming music, all that kind of stuff. I mean, people had like DVD catalogs and libraries and iTunes. Yeah, I mean, those types of things. But, things move so quickly in technology. I think it's important to sort of set that expectation that, there are certain things that will move on. But, to try to future proof. I mean, the reason that we're doing CAT6A shielded is because that is the thing that's going to give us the longest lifetime. And people ask, like, is it worth spending that much more than Cat5? Well, yes, because Cat5 is, in some view already obsolete. But certainly in the next 2 or 3 years, technology moves beyond it. So it's just part of the conversation.
What do you think, Aaron? Is it reasonable to expect that your, home automation system, your technological, whiz-bangery should last 10 years? Is that a reasonable expectation?
I believe so. Yes. I mean, I think to Michael's point, these are large scale computer systems, and they are going to need the kind of maintenance your computer would need, right? In some capacity, just to keep them going. It is definitely not a set it and forget it type of a situation. And we get calls from homeowners who have been sold a system and haven't really heard from the integrator from the time it was delivered. And
because it worked, or just because they didn't need their help?
It worked, but then it didn't. So because they didn't have a particular update or upgrade or whatever the case is, there's always something to do. So you can get a good amount of life out of these systems that we're installing. But there is technically no future. I think we've gone from saying future proofing to future readying a lot, because we know that it's so hard to guarantee. We can't really guarantee anything. But if you're selecting the right solutions for the right users, the right home, I think that you should expect probably a good decade out of it. And some homeowners, they don't care. If they're really into technology, they're like, we'll get the next thing. If we have to change this out in 7 years, we don't really care. And others are like, I really don't. I want this to last as long as it possibly can. And so we work with them to make that happen as well.
Do you find that companies support the gear you're putting in with upgrades and security patches and this kind of stuff? Are they pretty good about that?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons that we like the vendors that we've listed, right? I mean, if you look at Lutron, Savant, Cisco, just to use those examples, on the access control and security side, it's access and 2N cameras and access controls and door controls. I mean,
I don't know anything you just said, so
right. I mean, they're brands, and to be honest, that most homeowners also don't know what's the difference between Ring and 2N. But ultimately, it is, to your question, who's been around, who has the highest likelihood of being around, right? And of course, we can't predict these things, but once again, it's sort of like the Kickstarter thing. Like, if they're just a startup now, what are the chances that they're going to be around in 10 years still supporting your product, right? And even the bigger companies like Sonos have had this issue. Like, Sonos had a real PR nightmare a couple of years ago when they basically said some of the gear that people had bought between 5 or 10 years ago was now obsolete, wouldn't work with their new app, wouldn't work with XYZ functionality. And they had a perfectly good technological reason for making that migration and that shift. But, they had millions of units out there, and you're gonna have some pissed off customers because, even if it's 5%, I mean, that's still tens of thousands of people that are gonna be pissed off. And so, you really have to be quite selective and to a certain degree a little bit safe, right? I mean, we're not gonna just kind of go and say, hey, yeah, there is this new startup that has this really cool, innovative technology, and it may be cool and innovative. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're sort of looking at the entire picture, and it is so important to have those patches, have the security patches. I mean, just like we were talking about cybersecurity, if somebody just leaves a network switch with the same software now as it has in 10 years, there's going to be a bug in it that somebody can leverage and take advantage of. And so, yeah, you absolutely need to have the right vendors, and sometimes that means investing more than you'd expect in a switch, a Wi-Fi access point, because you're sort of investing in the future. You're sort of making sure that company has a revenue stream, that they will continue to have engineers that work on products that are 3 or 5 years old. And that is it's a different world for most homeowners, right? I mean, you don't think about a service plan, for the framing in your wall. I mean, you just think it's going to be there 20 years, or more, and you don't have to worry about it. But technology is a bit different.
I think just on that vein as well. I mean, with the pandemic rendering a lot of us homebound, and it's probably permanently changed to some capacity. I mean, certainly we're going to end up with a hybrid, work from home in the office model. But with more people working from home, TSP has experienced and made very clear there's a fair likelihood a lot of employees working from home are the biggest security risk to their companies. So
because they don't have the security protocols and equipment, right, that a business would have. It's just not something people generally do at home. I'm guessing that's what you mean.
Precisely. And so it's whenever we are this question is posed to us, we are always on the conservative end of being as careful and cautious as possible.
Yeah,
I bet their employers appreciate you guys are checking that out, because I wouldn't. Taunton could be bought and sold from my PC here, and no one would know the difference.
Yeah, and we actually find, I mean, we work, and this is kind of the IT side of the business, so we work with some great companies, even sort of financial institutions and things like that. And I think it is something that they don't think about. They're worried about the office and the security and maybe laptops that have roamed out, but home networks are a completely different opportunity for hackers. And we've done cybersecurity audits for clients and found issues. I mean, and you hear the stories. It's like security cameras that are old, have old firmware, never updated, but can be easily hacked into. All of those things are massive risks, not only for individuals, but also for the companies they work for. So it's a really interesting part of what we do.
Do you guys have trouble finding, people to work in the business? Is it difficult, like I hear so many trades say?
These days, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you're looking for a specific set of skills, in some cases, it can be really challenging to find the right people. And TSP has had one of the things I think that has really made us stand out over the years is the type of team that we have curated. Basically, we put a lot of faith in our employees and their abilities to care for our clients. And it takes a lot of work to get there. In this particular day and age with the pandemic and as crazy as it seems, we're doing quite well. Mm-hmm. Our industries, both IT and and the smart spaces side, are doing quite well. Everyone else is as well. So there's not a lot of good help to go around, but it's definitely possible. It might take a bit longer to make the right hire though in this climate.
Where do you look for people to do this kind of work? It would seem like you need forgive me for saying, but a rather disparate set of skills. You need people who are pulling wire and know how to do the, drilling through joists and masonry and all the, hands-on work, but you also have to have a pretty technologically savvy person to then make it work.
Oh, I was going to say, I think you and I, Pat, spoke on site. I mean, it really does depend. I mean, we do a lot of, we sub a lot of our work out. So electrical, for instance, a lot of that's done through some electrical partners that we work with. We have a Finnish carpentry a company that we work with that does a lot of our patch and finish work. So that isn't in-house. So it allows us to focus our energies on what we're actually good at, like designing these systems and commissioning them. But you're right. There is a breadth of skill that's really required, and generally, if our technician who works out in the field, for instance, is going to have some type of cabling experience, terminations, installing speakers and TVs, that sort of thing. But they don't have to be as technically advanced as our design engineers do, who are actually creating the systems to begin with. So it really depends on the role.
What are the best resources for folks who want to learn more about this stuff? If folks were asking me about building, I would say Fine Homebuilding, but what is your equivalent?
Well, I think there's a couple industry associations that have been around for a while. There's one that's called the Custom Electronics Design and Installation Association, otherwise known as CEDIA. So any bigger home integration company is usually a CEDIA member. They've got great resources, great training, certification. There's another organization called CE Pro, Consumer Electronics Pro, that also covers a lot of this stuff. And there's an organization that's called the HTA, is the Home Technology Association. Is that right?
Correct.
So they're also a good resource as well. A lot of great blogs about sort of really integrators and what we do as an organization, and to sort of wrap your head around the industry as a whole. So,
how about the nuts and bolts of it? What equipment is available, and what are there websites or periodicals that look at and review gear? Is that a reasonable thing to expect?
There's a lot of gear out there, right? And it's and a lot of websites, YouTube videos that review them and all this kind of stuff. And it is hard to know. And what we generally find is we're not going to hire somebody that has Lutron, Savant, and Cisco knowledge off the bat. That's a unicorn in our industry. But if we have somebody that has programmed big Lutron systems before, then we know that they can learn Savant systems, they can learn Cisco networking, that they need to in the field. So we're looking for sort of one of those things. But by and large, those resources of learning how what goes from A to B and what gets plugged in, that's so vendor specific that it's really kind of the onboarding for us with a new employee. We say, all right, you're going to go to this Savant training, to this Lutron training, to this Biamp training, to this Cisco training, and learn about these things. And as the real experience is out in the field, and only once you get to install one, troubleshoot one, figure out what's happening with something, do you really learn the nooks and crannies of these devices. So.
Do you have anything to add to that, Aaron?
I was going to say tsp.space is probably the best place you could possibly go to get information.
Well done.
But we put a lot of effort into our site. It's not just a bunch of pretty photos, which often home integration sites are, because our stuff is integrated into beautiful designs. So it's really, we're featuring more interior design and architecture work than our own. But we have put a lot of heft in there, good information, case studies, blogs, user interface videos, for a good reason. And we do in our blog listing, there are posts like things to avoid with corporate AV, things to look for in home automation solutions. So there is quite a wealth of information there.
It's good to know. So this is my favorite part of the show here. Can you both tell me about your own homes? Are they fully technologically integrated? Do you have any technological problems you're currently ignoring? I can tell you that your internet speeds are perhaps better than anyone who's been on the show. I think that's pretty cool.
That's so important for us, especially
Yeah, I
being that
bet.
we are tech superpowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go first because I think Michael's going to have a lot more to say than I do. I am in this apartment. I live in the Back Bay, South End area of Boston, in a really nice loft apartment that I am currently renting, and been here for a while, may be here for a while. Love the place so much. While I do have a home, I rent that out. Here we have smart lighting and some smart AV as well through Savant, and it's great. And I can't say enough about how it's benefited our lives, because I'm all about lighting. I don't know if you've noticed. And so scene setting.
You look really well lit, I can tell.
Oh, really? So yeah, I mean it's great, but I'm looking at a sort of a weekend home soon, perhaps to purchase and to put a lot of work into, and that is going to be tricked out, as they say, cool. To my needs. So.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you individually, but I'm going to ask you, Aaron, since we were just talking. But do you like doing this stuff at home? I mean, like when I was a carpenter, the last thing I wanted to do was work on my own house, right? Doing carpentry. Is it fun, Aaron?
Is it? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think it's fun because it works. Really. I mean, and I'm not a technician, as I've said, and so I'm not experimenting with all of the fun stuff that we get. We get a lot of demo equipment, and as Mike said, I mean, we have to constantly be moving forward. So someone's always tinkering with something at home. I'm not one of those people, but the technology that I do have and decide to integrate into the house is because I think it's worthwhile. Absolutely.
How about you, Mike?
I mean, I'm definitely the carpenter with a squeaky door, and everyone in the family is going to attest to that. I mean, part of it is that as part of my job, like looking at the latest and greatest, I'm always like putting stuff in. So I mean, for a relatively small home, like we have a door entry system which is completely over-engineered, and my wife likes to make fun of it. Like we've got pin codes and key fobs, and you can do it on your app and on your phone, and she just takes out the key and just bypasses the whole thing. Which is actually kind of an interesting lesson. It's like, at the end of the day,
it has to be easy, right? I think
it has to be easy. Yeah, absolutely. And so some of the experiences in my home are really about sort of understanding, all the interactions, all the pieces, how everything works together. I mean, we installed a Lutron, lighting system before we did a project where we installed the same system in 71 apartments in Reykjavik, Iceland. So it was sort of like, let's make sure that this works at a small scale, learn everything about it. How are we going to deploy, 1 unit versus 70? And this is kind of where Lutron does well with scale, and you learn these things by experiencing with one system. You say, okay, if I had to do this 70 times, is this really going to be, scalable, workable? And the answer was yes in that case. And so that's kind of the type of technology that I have. I have Cisco Meraki gear, here for the network, which is like very IT and cybersecure stuff. So, we definitely invest in our own stuff pretty well, although maybe don't tie up all the details, to 100% like we did for our own client.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, one of the more attractive ways to use this technology is, I'm an audiophile, like music a lot. Do you have music collections? Do you have those systems in your homes?
Aaron, do you? I don't even know.
I do. Music is constantly played, one way or the other, and so it was important again for us just to have exactly what we need. I mean, streaming is a big deal for us. We love Pandora and Apple Music, and it's constantly on. It seems like, and having good sound. I mean, again, for this particular house, we're not doing anything architectural because it is a rental, but we did invest in a really good Sonos system for 2 floors of a home, and I have zero complaints.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's quite good.
Yeah, and the same with us is like, we're generally Spotify and Apple Music users. I wouldn't call anyone in the family an audiophile, although we're starting to kind of move more towards like home theater, like trying to create a little media room and kind of a great home theater experience. But Sonos has been kind of the brand that we've implemented in our home, partly because it is so popular in a lot of our projects that, once again, just needed to know how it integrated. How does it work with Savant? How does it work with Amazon Alexa and all these different things? So, I've been using that. But really the streaming services, it's so easy and accessible, despite all of the audiophile sort of stuff that is a little bit more old school. Although there are new streaming services now which are really catering to that world. So
you mean with better quality sound
absolutely,
and denser files? Yeah, because that's one of the things I've heard about is you lose some of that information when stuff is streaming.
Yeah, and I think Tidal sort of started that process of kind of trying to get better quality audio out there. And one of the really interesting trends that we're starting to see is the idea around spatial audio, which is kind of it's sort of the home theater experience where things are coming from different directions, but even for audio performance. And Apple's really pushing that with even just like with AirPod Pros and stuff like that. But there's the ability for that to kind of translate into a music experience and a home listening experience. And really, I think for me, that's kind of the next frontier is the idea that a live performance, which is very hard to have seen in the last year and a half, that you can actually sit in a room and experience not just stereo in very good quality, but the idea that you can appreciate the spatialness of it, like that cymbals are coming from this direction and the guitar is coming from this direction, the electric guitar.
Oh man, I'm going to be able to relive my Grateful Dead concerts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully even better, right? So.
Probably.
Yeah. This time without the drugs. Yeah.
It has been a pleasure talking to you guys. Is there anything you would like to tell our listeners before we part company?
Well, I will say that the usual plugs. I mean, Aaron's already put in a great one for our website, tsp.space. We have an Instagram that we really try to keep up to date, not only on, all of our projects, but also sort of useful information. So that's TSP_smart_spaces. And, you can find all the other social channels on our website as well. So
cool. What would you say, Aaron?
Just a pleasure being here. Always been a fan, and we'd love to be back one day.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Aaron and Mike for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. That helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building.